So the session is called Why AI is a Merchant's New Best Friend. My name is Amir Nooriala. I work at a company at Callsign. We're a UK tech company. We use AI and machine learning models to passively, positively identify digital customers. We're the only company in the world that can positively identify rather than say if someone has malware or whatever else. We can actually positively identify that as that person. I previously worked at other fintechs like Oaknorth, as well as big banks and consultancies. And in the UK, I'm a judge for Tech Nation and a big champion for social mobility, which I'd happily spend an hour talking about, but we've only got 15 minutes, and that's not what you're here to listen to. So let's jump into the topic. So in terms of your experience of when you go into a store, it's something that humans have been doing for a very long time. Not necessarily a store, it would have been an open market. And it wouldn't have been of money. It would have been a physical live good like cattle originally that you would have used to trade and get what you want in return. And that would have evolved over time to inanimate objects, precious metals, and then eventually leather, paper money, and credit cards. All of this is with the purpose of giving the shopkeeper comfort that you're giving them something of value equal to what you are taking from them. And whether that is an actual good or with the advent of cards, whether that is credit that they can redeem at a later point. And shops before the advent of credit cards did offer things like IU credits because they knew you and you were in the town or village or suburb or city that shop was in, and they knew you from birth and they knew you were good for that money and to return it. And then with travel and all the rest of it, we had to come up with a way of replacing that, and we needed a way of giving a shopkeeper comfort to give you something without cash and without knowing who you are. And that's where we saw the first real verticalization of an identity. And that was done in a piece of plastic called a credit card, the Bank America card, which is now Visa. And then in terms of how that was done, in terms of the signature, that's evolved over time to chip and pin. Single purpose. Or someone else is covering you for that, and removing friction, because everyone knows the harder it is to pay for something, the least likely you are to purchase that good. And so that's the evolution we've seen, especially in the last century, in terms of in-store payment. Then with the 90s, we saw technology getting to the point where it could actually change the experience, whether it's in a bank or whether it's in a shop, and actually introduce the concept of online shopping or online banking. And what you find is when an industry first shifts to online, whether it's just habit or whether the technology doesn't give them any other options, what they do is they digitize that existing process rather than do a newly imagined digital process. So if I use the example of let's say a bank one, when you wanted to open an account, you went to the bank, you showed your face, you showed your government ID, they checked it all off and a utility bill and opened an account. Now, when you go and open a digital bank account with these new fintechs that don't have any branches, you take a photo of your government ID and you do a selfie video, and then they compare that together and allow you to open a bank account. That seems very slick and it seems very online, but there's no physical element to it. But that is not a digital process. That is digitizing the legacy paper process. And I'll give you another example of that, books. So obviously books have been around way longer than the 15th century, but with the Goodnight Press, affordable books became possible and mass market books became possible, and a great physical medium we all love to this day. And then with the advent of technology, people started thinking about how can I get books online? And the first kind of early attempts at that were scans, PDF scans. Now, PDF scans, they are correct. You can read a book online, but they're not a digital reimagining of how a book experience should be. And it took about 3 years. And I know the Kindle was not the first one, but it was the first that really got traction, of reimagining how a book could be. So you give it a device that is a similar size to a book because your hand is used to it. And you come up with e-ink, so you can read in dark, you can read in light. Instead of turning the corners and bookmarking that way, you can bookmark electronically. In fact, you can see the agenda and the chapters of a book. That's a digital reimagination of a book in a digital medium. And that's what we need to do with commerce as well. So what happened in the commerce world? Physical shops had payment terminals, so POS terminals as a way of taking your card payments. And then when it came to online shopping, how could they allow you to open an account and secure it? It was done very, very simply, username and password. So email addresses, passwords, and then you can add a card and have a card stored online in that shop. That's not, again, a digital reimagining of how the shopping process could work. It's got lots of friction, and as we've got more worried about account takeover fraud, especially when shops actually keep your card details online, it's not the most secure also. So we're doing very friction-inducing things like if you want to purchase something with a virtual card on an online shop, you're then going to get a text message with a one-line password, and you have to type that into your terminal and do it that way. That's not a reimagining of how commerce works, and that's the whole point of this presentation. And that's what I want to say is, it wasn't really out with the old and in with the new. It was just more of the old, but in a new channel. The other thing to think about is with COVID-19, I'm pretty sure every single presenter today is going to bring this up at some point in their presentations. We do actually have to rethink online, because depending on what country you're in, Sweden's obviously taken a different approach to us in the UK, but shopping is not the same. And a lot of people are reluctant to go shopping physically as well. So traffic has shifted online, whether that's a mobile traffic or web traffic has shifted online. And with that, fraud has shifted online as well. So what you're seeing from merchants is a massive reduction in physical fraud happening now. Because there's less traffic in the shops, shopkeepers can be more aware of what's happening, and they're less likely to fall for fraud. So fraud has shifted online. And in fact, what we're seeing from the merchants we're speaking to is that they've been surprised at where the fraud has gone. The fraud hasn't gone to mobile. They expected it all to go to mobile because that's where the bulk of the traffic is now. But fraudsters aren't stupid. And what fraudsters have come to the conclusion is that generally someone who has a mobile app and a website, the mobile app is newer, and so the investment there is fresher, and the technology is more up to date. And as a result, there's more weakness probably in the online shop. And so fraudsters are really targeting wherever is the weakest digital point, and that is the online, the web channels, as opposed to the mobile channels. So that's just a bit of kind of I guess color for those of you who are not aware of what's happening with fraud at the moment. So we've got digitizing, not digital, and we've got a massive shift of fraud to online. So how can merchants go purely digital? How can you reimagine the login processes and one-time passwords and all of those kind of things that we're seeing now? AI and ML. And again, I'm pretty sure every single presenter today is going to talk and say their company does AI and ML. So let me talk you through actually how that can work. Previously, companies have been able to deploy point solutions to minimize the risk online of fraud. So things like checking if you've got malware on your machine. Are you really in the country you say you are? Are you using the same browser? But these are all from different vendors. They don't necessarily communicate well together. They don't give a single view of a customer. It's quite hard to stitch them all together. And also it's quite expensive to buy lots of different point solutions. And they're all focused on bad. What is possible now is positive identification. And that means you are actually sure that person is who they say they are, and omni-channel, whether it's on web or whether it's in mobile. And especially for a country like Sweden, the Scandinavian, Northern European countries are very, very strong on this. That brings privacy worries. So how can you positively identify someone online without infringing on their privacy and doing it without inducing friction? So the accessibility is there as well. And you can do that passively with behavioral biometrics. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with the concept of behavioral biometrics. You might be thinking physical biometrics. So I've put a few details here just to differentiate the two. Physical biometrics are things like fingerprints, iris scans. They are intrusive. They are privacy intrusive. And they also introduce friction into a journey. Behavioral biometrics are passive. They're about measuring patterns in how you do something and building a model around how you do something, and then saying, yes, it is you again. So how you type, your keystrokes. When you type in your email address, how do you do the and? Are you doing right thumb, right index on your keyboard to do the and? How long did you overlap between the keys when you typed it? That is subconscious. It's muscle memory, and it's very, very predictive because you do it with a very small margin of error, similar each time. If you get really smart and look at phones, what angle did you bring your phone up? What speed did you bring it up? When you swiped on the screen, how quickly did you swipe? How strong was the weight of your finger on the screen when you swipe? What was the size of your thumbprint when you swipe? All of these things are very, very easy to capture now with any basic smartphone. And that's a behavioral model that we can use ML to produce a model for and an AI to detect and say it is you. And that's available now. This technology is not theoretical. It's absolutely available now. And the key is we can do this in a privacy preserving way. So we're not talking about what is your name, where do you live. All of that can actually be encrypted and tokenized. Or we can say this user, we don't know who they are, they have this behavioral model of how they type, how they move their mouse. Even your mouse is distinctive to you. The angle you hold it, how jerky you move it, that is geometry. And a model can be built for that as well. So all of those things can be done in a privacy preserving way and build a model for you. And the important thing is also they're approved by regulators. So you can do 2-factor, 3-factor authentication without one-time passwords and friction inducing processes. Also, at the same time, using the same SDK technology that you'd embed in your website or your mobile phone, you can do location. Now, I'm sure you're all aware that from an IP address, you can get location, but that goes to where your nearest point of internet is that's coming into your house. And if you're living in a village or a town, that might be actually a different city. So it's not that accurate. You have GPS and you have Wi-Fi, which can get very accurate as well. But you might not be aware, most phones these days have a barometer. You can even use that and the air pressure the barometer measures to work out what floor someone is based on and get a very accurate reading of they usually work on this floor of their office and they live on this floor of their apartment building, and use that to get comfort of positive identification. They're typing like they normally do. They're in a normal location that we're used to seeing them in. And then you can actually tag someone's device. So more than just what was previously done, which was the browser, because people change browsers, or browsers always constantly behind the scenes upgrade themselves. And if you're doing a browser tag, that gets lost. You can now go to the operating system, and you can even go to the hardware components. So the graphic chip, the computer processor, the CPU, the GPU. These things can be asked to run a process behind the scenes very quickly that you know they're always going to run in the same way. And then you get a persistent device fingerprint. And then with that triumvirate of data points, your behavior, so how you type, how you move your mouse, how you swipe on a screen, your location, and also, is it the same device they've used before? Very quickly behind the scenes, from a single SDK, a merchant can say, I know this is who they say they are. I don't need to do any extra passwords. I'm happy to let them log in. I'm happy them to use their card details and make the purchase. And it looks seamless. So to a user, all of this seems seamless because it happens in milliseconds. But for a merchant, you're getting full comfort that that customer is who they say they are in a privacy preserving way from a single vendor, from a single SDK. So something to think about. Please go and do your research as well. None of it's theoretical. It's real and it's deployable now. I obviously work for a company, that's why I'm talking to you, called Callsign, as you can see from my lovely hoodie. My email address is on the screen. I'm on Hopin if you want to contact me, or if you have any questions. I'd love to talk about the topic, but hopefully that was interesting to you and taught you something new as well around the domain of e-commerce and what's possible with technology. I think I have run out of time. I can see in the case of sensors, they could, but would need access to tracking data of the person they would like to imitate. So when you create an account with a shop or a bank, as part of the terms and conditions, you agree to share details. Those details, the standard T's and C's of most shops and banks would actually include the information required to produce the model on you. So it's not something you would do without consent. The T's and C's would get the consent. It's also something you'd only do in session. So you wouldn't do it continuously. You wouldn't monitor them when they're not on the shop. You'd only do it within session of when they're shopping with their consent. I don't know if there are any other questions. Great. Thank you all very, very much. And I hope you enjoy that. Cheers, guys.